So basically that's what today's talk is going to be about. It's going to be about what is perinatal mental health, how can we recognise it, and I'm going to give you a few ideas of what you can do, probably beyond what you're doing already, to help with this area of health. It's really important, isn't it, that we provide a holistic service, that we don't shy away from parts of it that we necessarily are and don't feel comfortable about. It's really important that I think this is covered, especially at the moment when we perhaps are the only person maybe that that family is coming into contact with, because people are reducing their services so much face to face anyway. Anyway, let's share the presentation. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. And those of you on Zoom, do feel free to come in the chat box and say anything that you need to. And those of you, I'll just open the chat box now. And anyone on Facebook, you can go in there. I'll be checking every now and again. It's only me here, so I will be just randomly checking to see if there's any comments. Okay, so officially, you know, what is perimental health? What are perinatal mental health issues? Well, it can be all sorts of things. So it can be prenatal, so it can be in pregnancy, or postnatal depression, which is probably the most common. It's in the typo already. Misspelling. It's the most common thing that we think about when we think about perinatal mental health. We often think about postnatal depression, don't we? But of course, it can happen in pregnancy, and it can also happen to partners as well. This isn't just something that is just for women. It does happen to partners. Perinatal anxiety, which is something that's quite big anyway and probably rising generally, but at the moment it's bigger than ever, and that's understandable, isn't it? Because we've got so many reasons for anxiety in our lives right now. PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. Someone who's had a traumatic event or have past traumas. We know now that PTSD doesn't have to be something that was, you know, you didn't have to be a soldier in the war. You don't have to have had some huge attack or accident to have PTSD. It can be from something you perhaps wouldn't even call trauma, but that have been traumatic events that can cause this, can cause an ongoing disorder. Often PTSD and birth trauma will go together. So we see a lot of birth trauma, don't we, in our practices, either whether that woman has just had a birth that was really traumatic for her, or whether she's on her second pregnancy and she had a traumatic birth before and she wants to do things differently. We may see either or both of those things. Postpartum psychosis, obviously a very serious illness that can occur after birth, and it also covers things like eating disorders. Sometimes having a baby and pregnancy can be a trigger for eating disorders as well. So we're not really going to be covering all of those in depth now, but I just wanted to give you an overview of when we talk about perinatal health, mental health, that's the areas that we're covering. And actually 20% of all mental health issues are in the perinatal period, which is really high, isn't it? Anyway, but since COVID-19 started, postnatal depression has increased from being in 15% of women to 41%. So it's a really big jump. Now, this was a study that was done in Canada last month. So it's not based in Britain. I know we're from all over the world here, but you know, I think it's been great that Canada have looked at this really quickly and seen what they're seeing in their communities. And of course, worldwide, we're all going through something very similar, where we have been shut away, we're in quarantine for much of the time, we've got a reduced access to services, birth and the process, if I could think of a better word, but the process of having a baby within a health system is different. So that's very stressful in itself. And then we've got the stress of sort of worrying about a virus being around and having a newborn and all those sorts of things. So certainly in much of the Western world, these statistics, I would say, are very much true across the board, I would imagine. And then perinatal anxiety has more than doubled, so that's gone up from 29% to 72%. Again, not really surprising. This is my third talk I've done on this, around this kind of topic since COVID started, and absolutely we're all seeing anxiety. And actually, I think we all personally feel that we are experiencing anxiety a lot more than we ever have done before, or certainly is one of the most anxious times of our lives. And that's because we're being constantly the things that we're hearing, the things that we're seeing, especially those of us who work in a health service, we're having to sort of keep on top and keep a track of what's going on. Things like how your service is working, what you are and what you aren't allowed to do, having to explain that to everybody that the care that you're giving, having to chat COVID stuff with every family that you come in contact with, because there's lots to discuss around it, and all of that, and plus trying to keep on top of what information your government's giving out, what's on the news. For those of you who watch the news, I watch very, very little because I was feeling my anxiety rising a lot. So there's lots of reasons why. I'm sure if we did a study about general anxiety and how much it had risen, it would be, the statistics might even be higher than that. So, you know, this is not really surprising that both postnatal depression and anxiety have risen dramatically. So we already talked a little bit about what causes mental health issues, but particularly for new families, it could be a trauma, could be a pre-existing condition. At the moment, it could be the sort of political and societal uncertainty. At the moment, we've got a bit of a drama going on about face masks in the UK. Probably a bit late to the party on that, or the rest of the world have been quite happily wearing face masks for months. It's quite new here. So that's, you know, and then there's stuff about the economy. So all of that and stuff, you know, if you are in a personal situation, which many people are, that's, you know, economically, it's very challenging for you because you have been, for whatever reason, you work in the service industry, or perhaps you've been made redundant, or, you know, it could be anything that causes a huge amount of stress and pressure. Not an easy time when you're having a baby, particularly both you know, everybody feels that, but certainly lots of men feel like they need to sort of step up their provider role. Is a huge sweeping generalization, but it's definitely true that lots of men feel that responsibility, that when they have a baby, that they are going to work whilst their partner is at home with the baby, perhaps that early bit, because, and so when you've had a baby, you're probably going to only have like one main income and perhaps a maternity income as well, or if you're unfortunate to live in a country where you don't have maternity care, it may just be one income. So to have all this stress about money and jobs at the time when you're having a new baby is going to be incredibly stressful. Obviously, the other thing that's COVID related is if you've got family members who are poorly. I've looked after families where they've had, you know, they've had sort of parents who've been in intensive care, who they're worrying about, who they haven't been able to see, and that's sort of even before you think about the sort of help and support they might have after the birth from somebody who they were supposed to be seeing, that support, you know, that kind of like village. And then we go into sort of the more everyday stuff, so the expectations of parenthood, so parenthood being very different to what we expected. Information overwhelm can certainly cause anxiety. I think that's one of the big reasons why anxiety is higher in our society these days, because we have a lot of expectations from social media, from those around us, and everybody who I've met who's a parent wants to be the best parent they can. And if the pictures you're seeing of parenthood, of good parenthood in your mind, are those who are perhaps I don't know, like on Instagram, or, you know, people that you follow, or these sorts of perfect looking lives, when you feel like you don't measure up to that, that in itself is extremely anxiety provoking, and it also can really affect your self-esteem, your confidence, how you feel about yourself, and what you believe in yourself. So expectations of parenthood is a really, really big one. Often when people aren't, you know, being the parent they thought they would be, they have a lot of negative thought cycles, so have a lot of negative thought patterns around themselves that go round and round in the back of their head, and that in itself can cause us to feel depressed. It can cause us to feel very anxious. Concerns about baby's health, obviously a big issue as well, isolation, and very much feeling out of control and a lack of power. And what I haven't added to this, but definitely I'll put it as a second thing, having a pre-existing condition also can have an effect. And also lots of the hormones that are involved with perinatal mental health issues are also hormones that are adjusted and are different when you are struggling with breastfeeding as well. So there's some really interesting crossovers between sort of what's going on hormonally and what may have been going on before your pregnancy hormonally, and what happens with mood disorders as well. So it's really interesting, and I haven't got time to go into it all now, the studies today, but there is some really interesting crossovers and links in that area. We're going to talk a little bit about it as we go on. So what might we see in the families we're working with? We might see, and this is particularly with anxiety, and perhaps a build-up of stress that's becoming a chronic stress that may turn into something more serious. So to start with, we might see this kind of a shocked look, that kind of someone looking very anxious or like they're in shock, like rabbit in headlights look. They may be talking really fast, they may not be talking at all. We might notice their breathing has got really fast, or perhaps they're holding their breath. They might be very tense, or they can't sit still. They might be asking us lots and lots of questions. Yeah, it's really typical with anxiety, isn't it? That we want to know everything. We want to almost like take control about that situation, how we're feeling. So we might just ask loads and loads of questions so that we can try and get hold of that situation for ourselves. We might see lots of negative self-talks. I've already talked about that a lot. When we have a low mood, when we're feeling really rubbish, we tend to have lots of negative thought cycles going around in the back of our heads. I'm sure lots of you recognise that from working with new parents. And they might also just tell you, I'm feeling really low, I'm feeling really down, I'm feeling really depressed, I'm feeling really stressed, I'm feeling incredibly anxious, I'm worrying about everything. Or their partner might tell you, or another family member. And often in breastfeeding support, people will say it's breastfeeding. It's really interesting. Breastfeeding can become a bit of a scapegoat. And it's not to say that breastfeeding isn't hard. Breastfeeding can be really hard for lots of people. But often I find that breastfeeding is blamed when it's actually something else. It's actually the expectation, life with a baby being very different, parenthood being very different to what they expected, or everything's just really getting on top of them, they're feeling really overwhelmed. We've already talked about the sort of control aspects, nitpicking, dramatization, irrational thoughts, definitely something that I'm seeing a lot more of at the moment with COVID around, it being in a pandemic. Worrying about unlikely events. And the thing is at the moment as well is that I think so many things are happening that we never imagined would happen. Like if someone said to me a year ago, oh, in 2020 your kids are going to be at home for months and you're not going to be allowed to leave your house, I would have just thought they were absolutely crazy. Like we've kind of got used to it now, but it is like this crazy thing has happened, or is happening, that we could never have imagined before. It is a bit like sort of being in a movie, not now at the beginning, but imagine trying to have a baby in that as well. It's like suddenly it doesn't seem necessarily like unlikely events. Now I think in 2020 you must feel like, well, that could happen, you know. So it's very expected that you would be worrying about things. I think it's really normal for us all to be worrying about things that we wouldn't have worried about before. And obviously one of the big signs that there's some sort of, you know, low mental health or struggling is a lack of interaction with the baby. And that's because it's really hard for us to, as human beings, when we're not in our good place, when we're not in our, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute, we're not in our relaxed state, to engage in human interactions, to have a human interaction, and that's with our loved ones and includes a baby as well. When we're spiraling, when we're feeling stressed, when we're feeling anxious, when we're all sort of up in our heads, all very depressed and sort of feeling very shut off, it's really, really hard to bond and build up relationships and be connected with those around us. So I just want to talk briefly about what our role could be, because obviously I've talked about mental health diagnoses here, and it's not our place to diagnose. And I suppose really I'm talking more about, let's help families have mental well-being. Let's support them to be able to look after their mental well-being so it's positive, rather than focusing on what they might have, as in a diagnosis, something they need medication for. It's really, really important that we refer people on to the right people to help them. But what I would like to encourage you to think about today is that actually there's wellness tools that we can share with parents, so that in the meantime, and while they're interacting with us, we are giving them tools, techniques, we're having the conversations with them that get them thinking about, how can I look after my mental wellness better? And that's useful for everybody. That isn't just for those who we are worried about. So I believe we are ideally placed to share practical tools with parents so they can start to care for their own mental well-being. We're not necessarily saying there's something wrong with you. We're just saying, look, this is a really stressful time in your life. It's a really stressful time in the world. How about, I think something that would really help you on your breastfeeding journey is if I shared some mental wellness tools with you, because they're useful for everyone. I really hope at the end of the day that you might use some of them yourself if you're not already. So one of the things we do, and again, if you work in breastfeeding support, you probably do this day in, day out, it's your bread and butter, is listening skills. So really listening, really letting that person talk. And again, as I say, at the moment, if we're the only professional or supporter or person that is giving that person time to be able to talk about whatever it might be, their birth story or what happened with their last baby when they tried to breastfeed, to be able to give that time is really, really lovely. And obviously there's some cases where stuff might come up that is, better dealt with a therapist, absolutely, and we can always recommend that. But there's a certain amount of listening skills that we do in breastfeeding support anyway, isn't there? So using those skills, absolutely vital right now. And then the other thing we can do is we can use tools to help calm the nervous system down. I'm going to explain that a little bit more in a minute. And we can also use positive self-talk, so turning some of those negative thought patterns, those self-deprecating or those very critical cycles of thought that go on in all of our minds, turning some of those into positive things, particularly based around breastfeeding and parenting. And then also talking to them about self-care, encouraging them to look after themselves even though they've just had a baby, and also reaching out for support, so telling those around them what they need and not be feeling that they need to do it all by themselves. So what do I mean when I talk about calming down the nervous system? So in a very basic term, our nerve up and let me drink water. Get my words muddled up. We have a part of our nervous system called the autonomic nervous system. So our autonomic nervous system is a part of our body that controls everything that's going on automatically. Basically, that's why it's called autonomic. The autonomic nervous system, it sits in the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve attaches, not only, it's a cranial nerve that not just attaches to places from the spinal cord to the face, but it also goes right down to other parts of our body as well, which none of the other cranial nerves do. And this is where our autonomic nervous system does its communication. And there's two arms to it. One is the parasympathetic and one is the sympathetic. So our parasympathetic nervous system is when we're stressed. It's when we are feeling anxious. It's when we are feeling on alert. It's a system that our body has got to keep us safe. All mammals have it, and even reptiles have it. It's the thing that keeps us safe. So if we were about to step out into the road and a car came driving along and we had to quickly jump back, you wouldn't be thinking about that, would you? Your body would do it automatically. Your body is putting all the things it needs in place to keep you safe. It's called your fight, flight, or freeze mode. That's what the picture's about, by the way. And when people are feeling low, when people are feeling down, they spend a lot of this time, and feeling anxious, they spend a lot of time in this parasympathetic nervous system. So one thing that will help all of us when we're feeling more anxiety, more stressed, and we're feeling more down, more depressed, is to try and bring ourselves out of this parasympathetic nervous system and have tools to be able to do that. it's really hard, as I said, when you're in this zone to be connected to others. In our modern times, we're in a system way more than we need to be. The system was also, you know, it was there. The whole flight thing was really there so that we could run away from predators. You know, if we were about to be attacked by a grizzly bear, which is obviously something we don't need anymore, but evolution hasn't quite caught up. And then our sympathetic nervous system. Our sympathetic nervous system is where we are supposed to be. It's our default system. It's where our body wants us. I also call it the rest and digest system, which is what that squiggly thing is there. That is supposed to be the gut. And in this system, we are calm. We can connect with others. We can think clearly. And the most incredible thing about this being in this system is that everything only works properly in this system. I mean, biologically, our body works properly in this system. So there's all sorts of evidence. And again, I don't have time to go across this tonight, but we know that the biological health of our bodies is very reliant on us being in our sympathetic nervous system. If we live in our parasympathetic nervous system too much, we get sick. That's why we talk about heart attacks and strokes and all these things being caused by stress. This is what they mean. They're saying, you know, we're in this fight, flight, or freeze mode too much, and our body doesn't function properly in that mode. So the more that we can encourage people to be in this sympathetic nervous system, the healthier our minds will be, the more we can connect with the humans around us, but also the healthier our bodies will be. So it's just vital stuff for everyday good health and a good life. So this is why I'm so passionate about it, because we all need to do it, and we all need to become more aware of it. And it's actually really, really simple, but you need to be consistent to be able to learn ways of getting yourself into your sympathetic nervous system and being there as much as possible. So here at the Mindful Breastfeeding School, this is how we do it. This is how we support people to be in their sympathetic nervous system as much as possible, and how we can help them get to it when they're feeling stressed, anxious, or down. So we use breathing techniques. We use guided relaxations. We talk a lot about self-care, and we give ideas, and we help people to work out what self-care is for them, because it's a word that's very banded around, isn't it? But it's really about what fills your cup, what feels good to you. And interestingly, people don't always know the answer to that question. It's about prioritizing connection, and it's also about seeking support. So we're going to have a little go now. So if it's safe for you to do so, I'm just going to quickly check the messages on Facebook. Oh, can't. Okay. Check at the end. Right. If you're safe to do so, so as long as you're not driving or you know, trying to do something with dangerous machinery or something like that, then I just want you to sit comfortably. I know half of you will have kids climbing over you or whatever, so just do what you can. Maybe if your kids are around, you can get them to do this with you. So just sit still, make sure your body's really comfortable. You can lie down, you can sit in a chair, whatever you want to do. And I want you if you feel safe to and you feel comfortable to, just gently close your eyes. And now with your eyes shut, I just want you to notice the air coming into your body as you breathe in. So just on your next in-breath, just notice it coming in. Maybe you can feel it on the outside of your nostrils. Really become aware of that air coming into the back of your mouth, down your windpipe, and then into your lungs, and then feel it coming out again. So just having that awareness. And then on this next breath, I want you to try and fill up all of your lungs. So to do this, you may want to put your hand on your tummy so that you can feel your tummy moving out as your lungs fill up with air. Just let it out with a sigh this time. And again, a nice big deep breath all the way into the bottom of your lungs, as deep as you can. And then when you're ready, let it out with a big sigh. And when you're ready, just do a third one. I'm going to do this one with you. That was a very short breath for me. I think I've been talking. So that's just, hopefully you just felt that just in those 3 breaths, or maybe you did 4 or 5. just that slight calming down of your body. That's all it takes. It really is that simple. It's why we always start with breathing techniques at Mindful Breastfeeding School, because it's so easy. We've all got our lungs with us, hopefully, and it can be done anywhere, and it can be done really discreetly, and it is so impactful. So just noticing that breath, focusing on it, taking your mind off the chatter, taking your focus off the chatter in your mind, bringing it within to your breath, noticing sort of true mindfulness, that really noticing something that happens all the time but you don't really notice it. It's just so automatic, something like breathing, but really noticing that feeling of air coming into your nostrils, down into your body, something we don't think about very often. So just that mindfulness can really help calm us down and make us feel more relaxed. So that's a great place to start. And if you are feeling that, if you're working with families and they're feeling quite stressed and you're really picking up on how stressed they are, and you're probably feeling, if you're supporting the breastfeeding, they're not really that engaged with you because they've got so much going on. And using some simple breathing techniques for the whole family, just starting off your session like that, can really make a huge difference with just centering everyone and bringing everybody a bit more together. Brilliant technique. Can help with pain as well. I often use breathing techniques before latching on, because we know that the more relaxed people are, the less they feel pain. It's not to say the pain isn't going to be there, but there can be a sort of tension and pain cycle going on. So again, anybody who is experiencing chronic pain, especially if we can't get rid of the pain, using breathing techniques can really, really help to just soften it a bit and help as a kind of coping mechanism. And then what we move on to is we often move on to guided relaxations. Now, if you're working with families who have done hypnobirthing and they already have done this stuff and they already love it, then encourage them to carry on. Tell them to pick a hypnobirthing track that they absolutely loved and keep listening to it. It doesn't matter if it's kind of about pregnancy or whatever, or if they liked it, if it helped to relax them, they can listen to it again. Or you can show them an app where you can get guided relaxations that they can use, and just encourage them to try and fit it into their day. Now, it's going to be really hard, isn't it, to give an extra thing to a new parent to do, but I say just ask for help at some point in the day and prioritize it as something that's really important to you, so that once a day you are getting 15 minutes to yourself to either do some breathing or just to do a short guided relaxation. I think the Headspace app does 10 free days, and I think they're 10 minutes long. 10 minutes is fine. 10 minutes is enough to bring your nervous system into that calm place. And by doing it consecutively through 10 days in a row, but I always say at least a week, you really start to feel a difference in your life. So I encourage families just to give it a go and see what a difference it makes to them, and it really truly does. Research now shows that by doing guided relaxations as a breastfeeding mum, especially in the first 2 weeks, but then onwards as well in the first trimester, it increases milk supply. It means that their babies grow bigger, and it also helps their babies to sleep longer. We have evidence for this now. It also helps bring down the rates of stress in new mums. So it really does make a huge difference doing guided relaxations, and it may feel like a bit of an extra thing to do. It may feel like it's so simple it's not really going to make a difference, but I always just encourage parents just to, you know, almost humour me, give it a go and see how they find it. So yeah, so it says here that it reduces the stress, and actually what they found was that the cortisol levels were lower in the milk that the baby was taking. So they measured the milk for levels of cortisol, and they found that the hind milk had lower levels that was going through the baby, particularly in the first 2 weeks after the baby was born. So it was really quite an amazing study. And I think that was just listening to one track during one breastfeed. And then we talk about self-care and connection. So acknowledging feelings, so important. It's important to be able to, I think when we become parents the first time, or any time really, it can feel really hard to say, especially something you've wanted for so long. It can be really hard to say, actually, you know, I'm finding this really hard. I'm really not that happy right now. And it sometimes can feel like a really selfish thing to say, but it's really important that we encourage families to be honest about their feelings, so that they're at least voicing them and communicate that with their partner as well. Or if they haven't got a partner, then whoever is available to support them, you know, parent or family member. One way of acknowledging feelings that can work really well that families can do on their own is journaling. I'm a huge fan of journaling. We do a lot of this on the Mindful Breastfeeding School. I give journaling prompts and ideas for people to start uncovering what's going on for them, and it works really well in pregnancy as well. And I don't know if you've read my book. So I've written a book called The Mindful Breastfeeding Book. Actually, I want to show you this at the end. I'll show that to you in the end. But anyway, we do a lot of journaling in there as well. We talk about self-care that works for them. So, you know, like I said, like a bath of candles may not be for everybody, you know. Really hard to find time for a bath, isn't it, when you've got a new baby? But thinking about other self-care activities, and particularly ones that involve the baby, is really good. And I think at the moment, particularly while people are sat in the house a lot, to help them think about what safe self-care activities they could do, especially outside with their baby, would be really useful. And then connection first and everything else will follow. So when someone's struggling with breastfeeding and they're finding it really hard, I always tell them to spend the time enjoying and connecting with their baby. And once they do that, once they get that bond, then the answers will become clearer, but also breastfeeding tends to go better as well. So as long as baby's being fed, really prioritize and focus on that connection and building that bond with their baby, because it's really hard to breastfeed without it. Obviously breastfeeding creates that bond, but if breastfeeding is stressful, sometimes parents need to make sure they're doing that bonding away from the breast first so that breastfeeding can improve. I don't know if any of you who work in breastfeeding support can recognise that or agree with that, but it's certainly something that works very well in my practice. And then absolutely we need to help parents to know where they can go if they need an extra bit of support with their mental health or with their parenting and their breastfeeding. So just giving those resources and sharing where they can go and get help. And again, at the moment, that might look quite different. And I'm also saying to parents a lot at the moment that they have to be perhaps a bit more proactive than they normally would, because they're perhaps not seeing the health visitor regularly or going to the paediatrician's office as much as they would have done before because of COVID-19. But those professionals are still there, and they need to reach out and ask for what they need rather than because someone's not necessarily going to come to them. I worked with a family recently where their GP surgery wasn't doing the 8-week checks of their baby, and so, you know, this baby really needed to be looked at and reviewed, and they were really reluctant to see this poor baby who hadn't been seen by a doctor since the day after it was born. So, you know, we had to kind of fight for it a bit, really. But I think I think unfortunately at the moment you do have to push a little bit more for services, and parents need to speak up and say when something isn't working. Otherwise people assume that everything's just going fine. Okay, so that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I hope that has inspired you a little bit to think about how you can help families that you're working with whilst you're, you know, looking after, you know, families at the moment. I just want to show you. Oh, look, there's loads of comments. Oh, there's no new ones. I'm just going to show you the book quickly, then I'll share the screen again. So yeah, this is the Mindful Breastfeeding book. I don't know if any of you have read it, but basically it's aimed at pregnancy, but it'll work for early parenthood as well. And it's got so the chapters are understanding infant feeding. So we talk a little bit about that we all come to breastfeeding with our own infant feeding story already. And it's about unpicking that and seeing how we feel about breastfeeding. And it's a really, really good place to start couples communicating about infant feeding. So chances are they've never had a conversation about it. So we go over that, and then we talk about the neuroscience, how breastfeeding works, positive self-talk, relaxation, trust and support. And then each chapter's got kind of like practical bits in it, like journaling prompts, and they can fill in. And it's also got, I don't know if you've come across her, it's my illustrator who did this is Jen McArdle, who's done these lovely pictures for it. So that's that, and it's available on Amazon in all countries, I think, all countries that have Amazon, and it's also on Kindle as well. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Mindful Breastfeeding training. So it starts next week, and basically it's a 4-week course. I used to do it face-to-face, but it's come completely online now, and this will be the 3rd online round I've done since COVID-19 started. I absolutely love teaching online. However, after this course, I'm going to be making some changes, and it's no longer going to be a live course. After the July course, I'm going to make it so that you can come and do it whenever you want. So this July course, starting next week on the 21st, is going to be the last time that you're going to have live interactive lessons with me for some of the course. Let me just share a little bit about it for any of you who are interested. So basically, to be a mindful breastfeeding practitioner, you need to already be working in breastfeeding support. to do this course. So you need to either be a peer supporter, a breastfeeding counsellor, you need to be a health professional who's done PFI, or you can be an IBCLC, lactation consultant. Mindful breastfeeding practitioner, you know, it works hand in hand with good quality evidence-based and up-to-date breastfeeding information. So the sorts of things people do with this qualification is they run antenatal classes. We have a three class course that people teach, but you can do it however you want, whatever fits in with you. People do antenatal one-to-one sessions. They do postnatal breastfeeding groups that incorporate all the stuff we were talking about, so the breathing techniques, the guided relaxations, the kind of journaling, positive self-talk stuff. People do breastfeeding support face-to-face online, so they might be doing mindful breastfeeding sessions. I know that a lot of people who have trained with me are doing these mindful breastfeeding sessions now. I get messages all the time from people saying, I'm doing this right now because they're feeling that their parents are really, really needing these tools, and it's something they want to offer on top of their breastfeeding support. People are also putting it in their courses, and people are also using it on the wards and using some of the guided relaxation on the wards. I think my pumping relaxation is up on the wall now, with one of those QR codes in a couple of neonatal units where parents can just take a picture of the QR code, and then they get the relaxation to listen to whilst they're pumping. So there's lots and lots of things that you can do with the relaxations and the breathing exercise as well. And then people are using it for online support. All sorts of things are going on. Oh, also like postnatal courses, so like a 6-week course for new parents where you give breastfeeding support, but you also do sort of mindfulness stuff around it as well. So yeah, it's an online course. It's over 4 weeks. We get started with the tool straight away. So as soon as you start the course, I start talking to you about doing some case studies and practicing the stuff that we're learning with the clients you're already working with. I do 2 live lessons. I do one will be the 21st. I always do them at 2 in the afternoon UK time because it seems to work well with other countries. I quite often have people from Australia or America on the call. I also had Brazil. So 2 p.m. UK time seems to work quite well. It's, if anyone is abroad and they think about doing the course, it's 2 p.m. British summer times if you want to have a look at how it converts to your time. The rest of the course is self-directed study. I basically open up a new part of the course every Wednesday. So over the 4 weeks, you get a new bit of content every week, but you can do it at your own pace. Not everybody does it live with us on the course, and that's absolutely fine. We have a Facebook group for discussion and support all the way through the course, so you can ask me as many questions as you want and be in contact with me. And then afterwards, you become part of the Mindful Breastfeeding community, and we are a group of practitioners based in all sorts of parts of the world doing different things, and we sort of work together and share resources together, and I'm always creating new resources and new products for you to use and new bits of support for you to use in your business. It kind of has a bit of a business coachy vibe as well, that group. So that is, you know, it's an ongoing thing. You don't just do the course and I'm like goodbye. You're very much, if you want to be part of the rest of us, and we kind of share what we're doing and collaborate with each other. So week by week, basically, the first week is an introduction, and we talk about the nervous system. We talk about the research that backs this stuff up. There's not huge amounts, but it's getting better, and we go over neuroscience, so you're understanding exactly what's going on in the mind and the body with new breastfeeding families. And then week 2, we talk about the journaling, helping people to uncover their feeding story. We talk about changing neurological pathways and positive self-talk affirmations and how we can use those with families. Week 3, we talk about the breathing techniques, using relaxation. I've put live call there, but it's actually in week 4. We practice the relaxations and the breathing techniques, and I talked to you about the case studies and how you can get going with those. And then week 4, we have a live Q&A on a call with me. We talk about connection, we talk about self-care, how we can empower parents to ask the right questions that they need to, so that they can have, you know, a really fulfilling early parenting experience. And then we talk about how you might want to incorporate this into your business or your area of work, wherever it is you practice with your breastfeeding work. I also do some stuff about teaching an antenatal class, so I give you the sort of 3-session class that you can teach if you want to. with teaching plans. I give you MP3 recordings, so all of the relaxations that I've written you get as a recording. You also get it as a script, so you can read it to the families you work with. You get PDFs to print off and use, and you get to come into the community, as I said. The cost of the qualification is £295. That includes absolutely everything, so you can get started straight away. I love this quote by Jade. It said, by the time I was home from Anna's training, I'd already recouped the cost of the course through mindful breastfeeding bookings alone. She did amazingly. She had a very long train journey and she got set up with a course, and it was lovely to have inspired her that much. That was a face-to-face course. Tam saying, I did the mindful breastfeeding practitioner training with Anna in 2019 and loved it. It's really fascinating, also extremely useful when working with new families during what can be a really stressful time. Highly recommended. So I'm not going to read all these out to you, but I get a lot of lovely feedback from people who come on my courses, and it means a lot. I absolutely love teaching this stuff, and what I really love at the moment is hearing from so many people what a difference it's making to the families that they work with, and how they really love having it as an extra tool. Sometimes, especially I think lactation consultants, we're working with these really complex cases where you feel like you've kind of done everything, or perhaps, you know, it's a really tricky situation where practically on a practical breastfeeding you know, side, there's not a huge amount you can do, and people love that they can then go on and share these tools with families to help them make them feel better about their own personal situation. And that's really where all this came from. And I'm not talking about my own breastfeeding experience here today, but it very much feeds into what I experienced, which was that, you know, you can have a situation with breastfeeding or with anything in your life and you can feel a certain way about it, but actually with these sorts of tools you can feel differently about it, and perhaps instead of beating yourself up and feeling like a failure, you can feel proud of the things that you are doing. And that's what these tools do. They really help parents to switch how they see something and how they feel about something, and it's really special thing to be able to give somebody or to be able to offer them or teach them that's going to make that sort of difference to them. Has anybody got any questions? It doesn't have to be about the training, about the talk, or anything they want to share. Hazel's asking for the references. Hazel, do you mean for the study that showed that what mindful breastfeeding techniques do, so listening to the guided relaxation helped with baby's weight? And because I can actually just quickly share that with you all now, so you've all got that. Actually, you know what? I've got all your email addresses, those of you signed up. I will share it for you. I will share it in an email for you. It's a really good study. It only came out last July. It's been out a year now, and it's really been able to, before then, I was talking about the research in mindful breastfeeding, I was having to kind of piece together bits of different information and kind of assume that it all fitted together. Now we have this study, which took many, many years to put together. It took them 10 years from proposal to actually doing a study. Now we have that. It really sort of changes everything, because we can really see what we've already known and seen anecdotally, which is that, you know, helping people to be more relaxed when they're breastfeeding by using tools and techniques makes a difference to the actual breastfeeding itself and how their babies grow and sleep and take in milk. I'm just going to have a little look on Facebook and see if there are any questions on there. Okay, I don't think there are. Okay, well, for those of you who signed up the talk, there will be information about the course coming to you. If you, I will answer that question in a minute, Stacey. If you want to sign up and come and join us, then we would absolutely love to have you on the course. I've got quite a few signed up already, but I have got some places left. So you'll be getting a link for that in your emails over the next couple of days. But you can also find it on www.themindfulbreastfeedingschool.com. And Stacey, I'm not sure. So after July, I will be releasing it again. It'll be slightly different without the live bit. I know what you mean about having too much on. I'm doing a lot of learning myself at the moment, so I don't think I'll be able to take anything else right now either. But Stacey, you're on my email list now, so you will be emailed information about that as soon as I have it, basically. But it'll be late. It'll probably be in the autumn sometime. the next one. So, but it is going to be different, like I said. Okay, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for that. Okay, guys, if there's no other questions. Oh, Cassie, yeah. So everything, so on the course, basically everything is recorded. So there's the live calls, they're recorded just like I've recorded this, and then they're put on the teaching platform. So I use a teaching platform called Kajabi. It's an amazing setup. Basically, there's even apps if you want to do learning while you're out and about. You can do it on your phone. I've done a few courses on Kajabi myself. It works brilliantly. You can just plug your headphones into your phone and do it. And everything is just placed on that course. So any live calls we do, you can ask questions, we can communicate on there. It's all going to be on there together, so you don't miss anything, even if you can't make any of the calls live. So it really does work well for those who are you know, in a different time zone. And what happens is, before a live call, I always give people an opportunity to ask any questions, so that if they've got any questions they want to ask, then I can make sure I answer them on the call. Okay, thanks, Amy. Okay. All right, guys, I'm going to go. You can always email me with questions or come and ask on the Facebook page as well. Okay. All right, everyone. Night. See you soon.